Let's talk about the relationships between Helen and the main characters within Hell's End.
Mm.
Obviously, the relationship with her sister.
Yeah.
How would you describe the development of that relationship through the film?
Well, as I said, without repeating myself, but with the relationship with, like, her relationship with her sister Margaret is very intense at the beginning. I mean, they both, I think they lost their parents very early on, so she's a sort of semi-mother, a maternal figure, but also sister, and they're almost like one and the same. They've almost become one. As Ian Forster, described them, that's why we sort of use that sort of Indian composite god image. So they almost had the same head, but they were, and we sort of worked at, I think of like, which is film, which is always you have to do is like build a history, a lifetime history very economically. And I think we did a lot of like, just unconscious touching and tactile and tactility or whatever the word is, and finishing each other's sentences so that we were like almost one. And then, and then it goes from that incredible togetherness to then being utterly sort of, I think sort of like taking revenge almost on her sister, sort of leaving her. And I think she loses her sort of her balance, but then finds solace with her, relationship with Leonard Bass, and then, creating a child who ultimately ends up being the heir, will be the eventual heir to Howard's End, which then ties the sister together. So ultimately they come back together, but just in a new formation.
And the relationship with Leonard Bass?
With Leonard, at first I think she's sort of, she's a project, at first he's a project, in a rather patronising way. He's somebody who they think, oh, we will help and we will try and sees his promise and will try and, it's a sort of part of her philanthropy and wishing to make the world better. But then ultimately, I think she identifies with him because as he has been sort of cast off in society, or was, lost his job, lost his prospects, she feels equally sort of rejected by her sister. Possibly not, but in an irrational way.
But is she feeling guilt because of the loss of his job? So is there guilt involved?
There's a huge amount of response. She does have a personal responsibility, but she actually has, at that point, she's foisted the responsibility on Mr. Wilcox. So she thinks it's his fault. So it's her sort of revenge almost. She feels responsible for Leonard Bast's loss of job. And I think in some ways she wants to make it better. In fact, I think she says, I want to try and make it better for him. Yeah. But I remember filming that scene on that boat. That's another flashback, because it's very strange watching a film, because it's almost like this sort of mobile photographic album where you get hurled back and forth, So it's still tricky to sort of see the whole, film and get involved in it. But one image that I got was sitting on that boat, which looks like a sort of rural idyll, with him rowing away, And then for some reason, I can't remember why, he rowed on his end, and then when it came around to doing the reverse on me, they switched the engine on. So there was, Sam, like, as often is the case with a close-up, way over, at the back of the boat. And with the engine, I couldn't hear a word he was saying. So most of that scene was me, which had to be post-sunk anyway because of the engine, was me just, like, trying to, desperately do a crash course in lip reading, It was, and if you look closely, I am squinting, And that was what, a lot of the time, acting is like combating the logistics of, of the filmmaking, process.
And the relationship with Henry Wilcox?
Henry, I think, gets in the brunt. I think whoever Margaret was going to marry would have got the brunt. And she's... I think, looking back on it, Helen should have probably married first, and the whole film and book starts with, her on the cusp of possibly, and that would have, been more suitable. I mean, that would have sort of saved her probably, but the unfortunate thing was that it didn't happen, and the Wilcox, that first liaison gets aborted. So it's Margaret who ends up marrying a Wilcox. I think, I can't really remember, but I mean, I enjoyed doing those scenes with with Hopkins because he's such a good actor. In fact, everyone was such a good actor. But he, she blames him. I think he's a useful scapegoat for her. And she sort of takes it out on him using the Bast, Leonard Bast, as a reason for hating him. And in fact, she's just really, underneath it all, just very grief-struck, I think, about... But I don't know. That was my take, I think.
Let's talk about some of the scenes that you're in, actually,
Yeah.
in the film. Do you have a favourite scene?
Do I have a favourite scene? I mean, usually, probably no scene that I'm actually in. I think I remember loving the scene, although it was difficult to do when I came and I brought the Basts up to Evie's wedding, or the sort of the post-mortem of Evie's wedding, and I dragged them up, and I just that ferocity, and I like that. I love that bit of, like, again, that single-mindedness, which I just found funny when she accuses them. She's saying that she's starving, and I don't know, she's saying, well, there was a restaurant car on the train or something. I can't remember. There was just sort of, but I think all the scenes. I never really have a favourite scene. I have a favourite scene when I'm doing it rather than when I'm necessarily watching it. I remember one horrific scene, which isn't hardly even a scene, but there's one moment when I think I'm coming back from music and meaning lecture with an umbrella. And this was a big trauma for me and Jim, because all I was required to do, I think it's a wide shot, and I'm walking across the square and it's pouring with rain. And all I have to do is somehow pretend to sort of open the door, turn around, close my umbrella and go in, and do it quickly. And that's so often in life, acting, you're made to feel very self-conscious about something that you wouldn't ever think of in life, which is such as, in this case, which was closing an umbrella. And it was a big, production scene with tons of rain and everything. And I was incapable of, closing the umbrella and going into the house at the same time, because it was just a disaster. I had mechanical sort of, meltdown. And there was Jim, who was just furious with me, because he couldn't understand. Haven't you ever closed an umbrella? I mean, it was just, he was so puzzled. And so whenever I see that, I still have a residual horror. But it's quite difficult, actually, walking backwards through, into a room with an umbrella, and closing at the same time. And I think I wrote him a letter, even, that was apologising for my mechanical failure. I don't know if I sent it, but I did find it the other day, which is hysterical.